The recording. Alright, Piss and Vinegar Day 29. Accessory days, it is cold as fuck in my cuck shed. So I didn't have the shirt off. I didn't have the black V-necks to show off the guns or anything. I just gonna wear a bunch of layers today because it's freezing up in my shed. My dog decides that he wants to lick everything. Trying to lick my leg during my set, which really threw me off. Trying to kick him off me. He licks literally everything. Like I caught him the other day licking the fucking brick walls of my house. I'm like, what are you? I don't know what's going on with him. I think he might have allergies or something. But yeah, he was licking the brick wall of my house. He licks trees. He licks dirt. So he licks just about everything. So yeah, rack shrugs. Didn't do the power shrugs today because my back was feeling a bit iffy and I didn't want to decompress my spine. So, yeah, just did the rack shrugs, and then I do a force. No, not a force rep. I do a rest pause. Sorry, I pick up my energy here a bit. I just finished this workout, so do a rest pause. Immediately go back into it. I need to either get a better squat rack, or I need to bolt this squat rack into the floor, because there's certain movements that I like to do dragging, sort of Smith machine-esque type form on. This is one of them. So, in order to do that though, with heavy weights, if the rack isn't bolted down, it starts to sort of topple over. So I need to either bolt it down somehow, or ideally invest in a better power rack. I want to probably get one of those like sort of power racks where you can attach like lever arms to them and shit, and they're getting to the point now where you can attach so much shit to these multi trainers. A friend of mine was going to give me his for free, but then the shipping cost was like $2,000, so it never ended up happening, unfortunately, because it would be a huge benefit to my training. But anyway, I might have to save up a few grand and buy one myself, so that I can get all these other things done, especially shrugs, because if I had a lever arm, I wouldn't even do barbell shrugs. I much prefer lever arm shrugs to normal shrugs. They just feel much better. So, and there's so much shit you can do with them. So yeah, doing a drop set, and then I do another drop set. I need to speed my drop sets up. I take a lot of time in between my drop sets. I'll blame it on the cold weather. Actually, I do 4 drop sets. That's right. I do 100 kilos, 80 kilos, 60 kilos. And then I do a plate Dorian Yates shrug. Like, he does this retracted shrug for the middle and lower traps, which oftentimes get neglected in our training. So that's a really good variation to add to the shrugs, because obviously the upper shrug is the most important one from the front. But from the rear, those upper and lower shrug, those middle and lower traps are super important for back thickness. I mean, Dorian had such an alien-looking back just from having super developed rhomboids, lower traps, middle traps, and spinal erectors to a decent degree. So they're super important from the back. Give you those kind of knots on your back that pop out through your shirt. It's a very impressive look. I've yet to get any, but over time I shall. And then yeah, this is the variation that I'm speaking of, where you retract the scapula versus just shrugging up. So you shrug up and back at the exact same time in order to get those middle and lower traps. I could probably do this with heavy weights. It'd probably be better to do them with heavy weights. It might even be better to just totally do a separate exercise, or not do this as a drop set, but rest and then do them with 40 or 50 kilos rather than this measly 20. But at the end of the drop set, this 20 kind of suffices. But it doesn't feel heavy enough per se. I also protract the scapula at the bottom to stretch out the mid and lower traps. Now moving on to neck curls. The camera gets knocked by my dog, so it starts to shift any second now, and I'm just going to skip past that because you can't see what I did. So yeah, that's fine. But yeah, did some neck curls, 5-second negatives, and explosive concentric, and then I do a bunch of drop sets. Well, I do a single drop set at the end with a bunch of force reps and manual assistance to lift, just to the point where I need to lift my own head up. Then I move on to some side neck raises, or whatever you want to call these, side neck extensions, etc. This is my single favorite variation I've found so far. The plate feels very unstable. This feels much, much better, and the tension stays on the neck the whole time. So really happy I found this variation. This is what I'm going to do from now on. And as I said yesterday, all my training is going to be entirely the same now. So I'm only going to have 1 or 2 workouts per split. So for back and biceps, shoulders and triceps, etc., or whatever it is, it's going to be exactly the same over and over. I'm not going to be experimenting anymore. I've figured out what I want for the most part. Maybe here or there I'll switch an exercise out, but everything's staying the same because I've found the most bang for the buck exercises for me. So yeah, these are good. Just got a karate belt looped, and then yeah, and man, if you're not doing side neck raises, you're just doing the curls and the extensions, you're missing out. My neck has grown probably about an inch over my weight cut from just adding neck. Well, apart from adding high intensity, changing to high intensity was a big part of it. But another big part of it was switching, well, not switching, but adding side lateral neck extensions, whatever you want to call them. Because realistically, that's what gives you the width of neck. So my neck has gotten bigger my neck has gotten bigger whilst losing fat at the same time. So yeah, realistically, I've probably put on more than an inch because I've also lost fat at the same time. So yeah, definitely find a variation to do with side neck curls. You will look very goofy doing these at the gym. I mean, most neck variations people will look at you for, but fuck them. Go out to and headbutt them with your extremely powerful neck flexors. They'll never see it coming. I'm not going to be held responsible for any liability here. Then I switch side. I think I do some rest pauses on this one, or no, I do some force reps. So I start using my obliques to get the weight up. Standardizing this is going to be hard because obviously the obliques come into account a little bit. Obviously I'm kind of turning over with the movement with my spine, but I mean some movements you just simply can't get them exactly the same rep every single time, in which case you just have to take it with a grain of salt, and you only start, and in that case you only progress when you truly know it's time to progress. Like a dumbbell press, for example, is an extremely good movement for knowing exactly where you're at. Like the reps stay exactly the same every time. There's not much kind of, unless you're cheating the reps, but you know, if you're not cheating the reps on a dumbbell press, if the depth is there at the exact same time every single time, then obviously it's a much easier movement to keep honest. But some movements aren't so honest, if that makes any sense. And then I move on to neck extensions. I don't take these to total failure, maybe 90-95% failure for these, because I don't like the sort of tension headaches that I get in my neck extensors after doing these if I take them all out to failure. And again, realistically, this neck, or this part of the neck, isn't really that important for aesthetics, although if you're an athlete, these are super important because it will stop you from getting knocked out or concussed. I mean, the whole spectrum of neck is important, but that especially. And then I move on to some sit-ups, doing 3-second negatives. This makes it a lot harder, guys. Like if you're doing normal sit-ups with no slow negative, not only are you going to get a lot of sort of momentum at the bottom because you'll have a stretch reflex, it also just makes it that much harder to do these, long, drawn-out negatives and controlled positives. So, I only get 15 reps with a 10-kilo plate on my chest. I could probably get, 40 with normal rep tempo, but this way I can really feel the abs contracting great. I get 15 reps here. I'm using these post-workout videos to count my reps now. I'm not counting any of my reps during my workouts, and I'm finding that makes it much easier just to focus on going totally to failure and focus on the mind-muscle connection. Because a lot of the time people think they're going to failure, but in reality they're not. If you really think about it, a lot of times you will leave reps in reserve, especially movements where the resistance curve isn't exactly great. Like this is a great example of a movement where you may actually not go to failure. Like a dumbbell press or any bench press variation or pull-ups where it's glaringly obvious when you've gone to failure. You can't lift it back up. You can't lift yourself back up. But with sit-ups, it's a little different. Or, certain movements, side lateral raises, or, these kind of iffy movements, it's hard to explain the dynamics here, but some movements you might not actually be going total failure with. So if you can record your workouts and see how many reps, see what's going on after the fact when it comes to the reps, that way you can focus on the set at hand during the set. Really think about what you're doing. Stay focused. Now I'm doing some drop reps with some force negatives, and then I move on to my leg raises. I'm gonna figure out a better way of getting into this leg raise. Oh fuck! Oh, I drink water. Oh shit! You know when you drink water and like your esophagus isn't ready for it or whatever, and you get like a big pain down your fucking sternum. Oh, anyway, I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one, but that shit hurts real bad. It's like when you're doing a shit and you push it too hard and it's a really big poo and it hurts real bad. It's the same thing when you drink too much water down your esophagus and it stretches out your esophagus. Anyway, yeah, leg raises. I do this variation to get my hip flexors trained too. I do this variation that way I can progressively overload with weights rather than with reps. Because if you're doing body weight, you're gonna get up to a certain rep range and it's just too many reps. So I like this. Oh, fuck, man, did it again. And then I move on to some oblique work. I do some teapots. So this movement that you're about to see is one of these movements where like a lot of people I would probably assume it's, well, I'm doing a bunch of force reps here, actually doing some force negatives. But the next movement you're going to see is a movement that a lot of people probably assume is some meme movement. It's bullshit. But in my opinion, it's actually the best oblique movement because you can actually go to failure on it, like in a way, like when you do Russian twists, it's very difficult to take that movement to failure because it's very difficult to just keep it consistent. Whereas this movement, it's very straightforward. It's like a pull-up. It's like a bench press. When you fail, you fail. You can't get back up. So I really like this one, especially when I bend over slightly, because when you bend over, you can contract your abs a little bit better. And part of the function of the abs is spinal flexion. In the posterior, sorry, not posterior, but in like the, I'm forgetting the plane now. I'm having a brain fog, but there's 3 different planes you can move throughout space, and there is. Anyway, I'm rambling here, but basically, yeah, it does spinal flexion both ways, laterally and sagittally. I don't know, not totally sure. I can't remember. It's been a minute since I read exercise science textbooks. But anyway, yeah, this movement's really good for contracting your obliques, and you can really get a huge contraction at the top, like by over squeezing. So you go down one way and then you go over the other way. So like I go down here and then I go all the way over the other way and contract my oblique. And this one's also very good for spinal health, because a lot of times we hurt our backs not twisting. Sorry, we hurt our backs not leaning directly forwards. We lean slightly to the side, say at 45-degree angle, and that's when you injure your back in these more awkward positions. So this one's really good at strengthening the obliques, getting the obliques big. I just take these to failure, mechanical failure. I don't do any drop sets or any rest pauses, etc., because I don't want the obliques to get too big, and I don't care how big they get really. So this is almost an experiment to see whether or not you actually even need drop sets or rest pauses to get a muscle big. Hopefully that doesn't get too big, because obliques, to an extent, people are scared of training obliques because they think if it gets too big it make their hips wide, but you do need to train them to a degree. And this is a perfect example. I am relatively lean right now. I have a shit metabolism, but as you can see, I mean, like, I'm relatively lean, but my abs aren't. Oh, my bad, the recording stopped there for a second. But yeah, up until very recently, I didn't train my abs for years, and that's a fucking bad idea. People will always say, train. Oh, you just do deadlifts, you do 2 squats, you'll have big, strong abs. Wrong. You need to isolate your abs, otherwise you'll be in my place where they are underdeveloped and thus they don't come out until you're at a very lean body mass index or a fat percentage. So I'm probably about 13 to 15% body fat right now, and if they were bigger, you'd probably see them far more defined, and thus I wouldn't have to cut so low. But because they are not big and muscular like other body parts, they're going to be a lot harder to now get to see at a visible level. I'll have to get down to 12, 10% body fat, of which I'm not going to be willing to do because I don't want to get that lean. So I'm probably not going to see my abs this cut around, and that's fine. But that's just a warning for anyone else out there who's training. If you're in a bulk right now, especially, train your fucking abs. People train their abs when they're cutting. They don't train them when they're bulking. What the fuck are you doing? You build muscle in the bulk. Bulk and build your abs up during the bulk so that when you cut, you won't have to cut so aggressively. Like me, and if you have a slow metabolism like me, it's especially a fucking lose-lose situation. So train your abs. You will not regret it. Anyway, see you guys tomorrow for more Piss and Vinegar. Bye-bye.